neocons now want to pretend with some sort of act of defiance on her part. It was like bad intelligence. Did anybody challenge that from the intelligence community? Were there any leaks saying that Tulsi Gabbard is wrong? No, she was accurately reflecting the consensus views of the U.S. intelligence community.
So recently, Aaron Maté was on Judge Napolitano's podcast to talk about Israel's strike on Iran and why it's put Donald Trump at odds with his hand-picked director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. He also gets into why the Iran war is so dangerous from a U.S. perspective compared to other wars in the Middle East. So let's watch and let's react. Can't wait to hear what he says. And please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
How dangerous was it when Trump uttered his deceptions in Saudi Arabia last month, condemning neocons and condemning military intervention in the Middle East, all the while CIA, MI6, and certainly Mossad were planning the attack on Tehran that occurred last week?
Well, you nailed it, Judge. He's showing his anti-interventionist, anti-neocon rhetoric, especially when it comes to the Middle East, to be a complete fraud. He's showing that he's completely controlled and captured by the same neocon forces who he claimed he opposed. What he's doing is one of the most dangerous things I've ever seen a world leader do, telling the people of Tehran, that's millions of people, to evacuate, reposting apocalyptic messages from Mike Huckabee, who talks about Trump being chosen by God and compares him to Harry Truman, who dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Trump is showing himself to not just be a fraud, but one of the most dangerous leaders we've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, those are scathing words from Maté, who's actually been pretty charitable toward Trump, especially on Ukraine. But hate to say, it seems like Trump's fallen into the arms of Netanyahu. Whether or not he was totally complicit with using the negotiations with Iran as a ruse or not, he knew about this clearly a few days ahead of time. How far in advance he knew about it is, still a little bit murky and nebulous. We'll have to check out more information on that to come. But in either way, it really defied the stated foreign policy aims of the U.S. for this to happen. And hey, if I'm a Trump supporter, I'm pissed right now, even if I feel different, even if I support this strike on Iran, because this is going to split Trump's coalition. And he's not going to be able to get much of his other agenda through, especially with this fallout with Musk and this issue. This is not going to bode well for when he wants to clamp down with protectionist tariffs and, potential mass deportations. I think it's really going to create a rift in the Trump coalition, and pretty much all the dissidents that were anti-war that supported him are off the wagon now for good.
How ruinous is it for American negotiators and diplomats when the president leads the whole world, including the people with whom our negotiators were actually literally negotiating, to believe an untruth, and then boasts about the fact that they've been murdered?
He's showing that there's no point in any sort of diplomacy involving the U.S. That's the message he's sending. And he keeps touting the fact that he did issue the 60-day deadline. Back in April, he said there's a 60-day deadline for Iran to, step up and make concessions, or else there's going to be consequences. But what was happening right after Trump's 60-day deadline? He had scheduled new peace talks. So if you're Iran, and yes, you've heard Trump's 60-day deadline, but yet you've been scheduled to hold a new round of talks with Steve Witkoff, Trump's top envoy, you're understandably going to think that these talks are continuing and that Trump's 60-day deadline, as many other deadlines have been, including on tariffs, were just bluster. But yet Trump used the cover of diplomacy to enforce and abet Israeli aggression. So, and Trump keeps saying that he thinks this will lead to a deal with Iran. If anything, this will incentivize Iran to have no further interest in diplomacy with the U.S., although they're still making overtures. But in terms of the level of trust, it's at less than zero.
Yeah, that's the key thing. Trust is less than zero, not only from the Iranian perspective, and by the way, it would be a good thing to have peace with Iran finally after being at its throat, supporting a proxy war in Iraq against it in the 80s, downing a passenger flight, Iranian Air 655. Google that if you're not sure what that is. The U.S. misidentified a commercial flight and thought it was an F-14 and killed, I think, 290 people in the process. They've been talking about and stoking and planning this idea of regime change forever. It would be nice if that didn't happen for once. I'm glad Maté made reference to this, arbitrary deadline and related it to the tariffs because, Trump didn't follow through on that deadline. And if you're scheduling negotiations after that point, it looks like Iranian diplomats were in Bahrain ready for the next round of negotiations to transpire when this happened. I think this was done deliberately, timing-wise, by Netanyahu, who wanted to sabotage the entire thing. And instead of treating Netanyahu like, an actual world leader rather than kind of the leader of the U.S., Trump just went along with it. He boasted about it on Twitter. Essentially, regardless, he wants to save face, even if he wasn't in on this completely, despite the fact that it really slapped the U.S. foreign policy aims in the face. It sabotaged them in some way. This is crazy.
Less than zero. I just wonder what kind of damage this has done to the United States around the world. Oh, here's what I want to read to you. This is what Trump posted at 6:30 in the morning on Friday morning. Now, the Israeli attack started about 8 hours before that. I gave Iran chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest of words to just do it, but no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them that it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told, that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world by far, in caps, and that Israel has a lot of it with much more to come, and they know how to use it. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They're all dead, D-E-A-D in caps, now, and it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left, and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction. Just do it before it is too late. God bless you all. Basically saying, if you don't come to our terms at the negotiating table, we will kill you.
This is the new form of American diplomacy. Bomb first and say that's our leverage tactic for bringing you back to the table. It's crazy, and this trust is eroded. And what's so insane about this, too, is how it will affect the U.S. relationship with Russia, too. So if you're Putin or Lavrov or the Russian delegation and you want to secure a peace from the American perspective with the Russian delegation, what makes you think if you're a member of Russia's party that you can trust the U.S. whatsoever? Look at how they're dealing with this Iran situation. And look at how Ukraine dealt with that drone strike on the nuclear bombers a few weeks back. I don't think that there's any iota of trust that can be had in a party that's bankrolling one side of that war. So these two are interrelated. The world is watching this event and how the U.S. plays out its foreign policy empire building schemes, and it doesn't bode well for the U.S. in other theaters either.
Yeah, he's basically saying there's no point in negotiating with us because we're only seeking your surrender. What are those terms that Trump is trying to impose? Well, initially in the talks, Trump and Steve Witkoff claimed that they were open to some level of enrichment, which was basically the premise of the last Iran nuclear deal, which Trump broke in his first term. Then they changed that. And not only did they start saying that Iran can't have any enrichment, which for Iran is a red line because they have the right to enrich under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They developed that enrichment capability as a major signature achievement of their sovereignty, and see giving up that enrichment capability as a violation of their sovereignty and their national character. They also have domestic energy needs that they want to meet. So Trump then started saying no enrichment, and they also started talking about caps on Iran's ballistic missiles, which means that basically they were demanding that Trump was demanding that Iran consent to being left without sovereignty, without being able to meet its domestic energy needs, and also without being able to defend itself. Because if they're not going to have nuclear weapons, which they said they do not want, they still need some missiles to defend themselves from the two countries that are constantly threatening them and their allies, which are the U.S. and Israel. So Trump is basically saying to Iran, no point in negotiating. You must surrender to having no sovereignty and no ability to defend yourself. And that's what he's still demanding now.
Yeah, I think this is a really great point. In fact, I've heard few others make this point, is that midway during the negotiations, the Trump administration seemed to shift from a no nuclear weapons program policy to a no nuclear enrichment policy. And the latter is a complete poison pill. It's a non-starter. Basically every world power has agreed that Iran should have some form of uranium enrichment. It's used for many different purposes, power and some medicinal purposes, actually. So for them to bait and switch this way, it really seems like the sabotage was underway, at least at that point. And again, it's hard to know how complicit Trump was on this scheme to use the negotiations as cover for the strike, to lure Iran into a position to not think that it was coming. But in either case, just changing that seems to have just completely just derailed these negotiations, even before the military strike. If you're going to say no enrichment, it's just not a deal that Iranians could ever accept, the government.
Last night on Air Force One, the president was actually asked by a reporter, you can't see who it is, how does he reconcile his support of the attack by Israel with the statement made under oath by Tulsi Gabbard, who, of course, wasn't speaking on her own. She was speaking as a result of an assessment by MI6, Mossad, and CIA that Iran does not have nuclear capabilities. Chris has very cleverly combined the two of these together. Watch this.
You've always said that you don't believe Iran should be able to have a nuclear weapon, but how close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon.
Hear what she said. I think they were very close to having.
This is the craziest, I think, thing from Trump I've seen this entire week and how he's responded to this. And there's been a lot of weird moments, but he handpicked Tulsi Gabbard, used a lot of political capital to get her through Senate confirmations when she was a particularly, controversial candidate. And why was she controversial in Washington? Well, she wasn't a pure neocon like all the other directors of national intelligence have been, like Pompeo, who tried to assassinate Julian Assange, by the way, and tried to draw the U.S. into every ridiculous conflict imaginable. So for him to say this is nuts. I can't wait to hear what Aaron has to say about it, but it certainly put Trump at odds with her and the demonstrative intelligence that combined not only the CIA intelligence, but also MI6 and Mossad. Neither MI6, Mossad, or the CIA is on the record believing that they have a nuclear weapon. And even the capabilities. Tulsi Gabbard said there's no evidence they've even started that program back up since 2003. That's over 20 years.
How can she stay in that job after he said that?
That's a great question. I look forward to her answer. He's humiliating her, and he's actually humiliating the entire U.S. intelligence community. He's saying that he doesn't care what the assessment is of the U.S. intelligence community. He's like Dick Cheney on steroids. Dick Cheney got back the intelligence on Iraq WMDs that there were none, so he ordered it to be fabricated. Trump is saying very openly in public that he doesn't care what his own intelligence officials say. He's going to ignore them if it serves his interests of helping Israel attack Iran and possibly entering into that war himself, which I think by all appearances he is planning to do. Just today, CNN reported that the most recent U.S. intelligence assessment on the matter said that not only was Iran not pursuing a nuclear weapon, but it was also up to 3 years away from being able to produce and deliver one. That is what the most recent U.S. intelligence assessment said on the topic, according to CNN, and they cited 4 people. And I have every reason to believe that that was credible, because notice that when Tulsi Gabbard came out with her statement in March, which neocons now want to pretend was some sort of act of defiance on her part. It was like bad intelligence. Did anybody challenge that from the intelligence community? Were there any leaks saying that Tulsi Gabbard is wrong? No, she was accurately reflecting the consensus views of the U.S. intelligence community, because the U.S. intelligence community can see what the rest of us can see, which is that Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program. They formally decreed that there will be a nuclear weapons program, and they were open to negotiations on a nuclear deal with the U.S. because Trump tore up the first one, and they wanted to get back to that agreement. So what Trump is doing is just one of the most reckless statements I've ever heard from a president, on top of him calling the people of Tehran to leave, because he's saying, I don't care what the facts are. If it serves my agenda, I'm going to say something else, and humiliate his top intelligence official in the process.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree with Aaron here. He made a lot of good points there. The one thing I want to add, though, and be clear about is that I would never take what the CIA says about intelligence, or, even the director of national intelligence says about it, just as the truth, as the innate truth. But there is some helpful subtext here, and that's the fact that the CIA and the U.S. intelligence services, the IC, actually generally want to do everything they can to create pretexts for war. They did this, in Iraq. The WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, they're generally inclined to create propaganda saying that these people do have the weapons. But in this case, they don't. So even in cases where the CIA doesn't say that they had the weapons that they're being alleged to have had, or an advanced program that they're alleged to have, Trump just says, I don't care. I think they're close to having one. Well, on what basis? He never cites it. It's really on the basis of the war propaganda, which he seems to have been swept up in. I really hate to say it.
Here he is again. Iran, Chris, if you want to put that up, I'll read it. Iran should have signed the deal I told them to sign. What a shame and waste of human life. Well, tell that to Bibi. Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. Chris, put up that still of Netanyahu at the United Nations with the mock-up of a bomb, just to show how long this drumbeat has been going on and how absurd and irrational these arguments are. You have the still, Chris?
Well, let me comment, Judge, while Chris goes and finds that.
Go ahead.
The issue.
There it is. Now, do you know when this is? This is 13 years ago. He was peddling the nonsense that they are 90% there.
Yeah, final stage, guys. Final stage. It's been the final stage for about 30 years. He started doing this propaganda campaign in the 90s. And now, for some reason, people now believe it. Suddenly believe it after crying wolf for like 30 times over the course of 3 decades. I think there's examples from 92 where he was saying that. I know there's articles from the 80s saying that Iran's close to getting a nuclear weapon. And it's just part of this war propaganda. That's all this is. It's all it'll ever be. He wants regime change there, and it would take eyes off of what he's doing in Gaza. That's why he wants it.
Yeah, and it goes back longer than that. He's been warning about this for a few decades now, at least.
Exactly.
He's a pathological liar because he's pathologically committed to aggression and supremacy. And the reason why he wants to target Iran is that Iran resists U.S.-Israeli aggression in the region. That's what he only cares about. There's nothing to do with nuclear weapons. If Trump and Netanyahu cared about nuclear weapons, there are many paths they could take. First of all, there's the path of negotiation that they were on, which Netanyahu and Trump have destroyed. There was the Iran nuclear deal, which Trump killed the first time. And there also has been a proposal, and this does not get as much attention as it deserves, from Iran and pretty much the entire world on the table for years, which is a nuclear weapons-free Middle East. Iran has signed on to that proposal many, many times, where no one in the Middle East should have nuclear weapons. But because Israel and the U.S. insist on Israel having nuclear weapons so that it can threaten everybody else, they put everybody in great danger, and they create these constant crises themselves. And that's why Netanyahu won't give up nuclear weapons, and no Israeli leader will, because their whole existence is predicated on aggression and force. That's how they rule. I mean, the New York Times pointed this out after October 7th, where the New York Times said that Israel was shaken by October 7th because its aura of power was challenged. That's how these people rule, not by cooperation, diplomacy, getting along, simply by threatening everybody else.
Yeah, how ironic is it that Iran is actually a member of and bound by IAEA stipulations regarding uranium enrichment, but and does not have a nuclear weapon, by the way, or a program, according to Tulsi Gabbard, who Trump is supposed to trust, I guess, if Trump's going to put you in that position. But Israel does have nukes, and they won't admit it. It's the worst kept secret in the Middle East. They have nukes. They won't admit it because then they would have to be subject to some of these regulations and restrictions and inspections. And for some reason, they get a free pass on that, and they can predicate their war effort against a country for fear that it might acquire a nuclear weapon, the same type of weaponry that it has, but will not reveal to the world. It's just, there's so many layers of irony to this.
How badly has damage been inflicted on Israel by the Iranian response? Do you have a handle on that? I know the IDF is not publicizing it, but has Ben Gurion Airport been hit and closed, as we've been told?
I know that Ben Gurion Airport has been hit. Israel has imposed a lot of censorship on images coming out of there to conceal the extent of the damage. So unfortunately, Judge, that's just not something I can really speak to. What I can say is, I've always questioned whether Iran can sufficiently deter Israel in a war, because unlike Iran, Israel, with U.S. help and the help of many more allies, they're pathologically committed to regime change. They orient so much energy, resources, military power into doing that. And we've seen that. Iran is defensive. Iran just tries to defend itself from this constant onslaught. And so given that, I have to think that Israel has planned for something like this and planned to have some hits from Iran. The extent of the damage by Iran, I'm just not in a position to comment on.
Yeah, we know they planned it for a long time. Even Axios reported that this strike was 8 months in the planning, and indeed that was not a well-kept secret because inklings of it trickled out to the U.S. press just a few months ago. You had major stories covered by corporate media, by the way, that said, Trump had averted a war with Iran because part of his cabinet wanted it, part of his cabinet didn't. He ultimately sided with the ones that didn't. But yeah, this has always been part of the plan. We know that the clean break memo showed that Iran was on the list of 7 countries that the U.S. government wanted to overthrow within the course of 5 years. And when some of those went disastrously, they were so brazen as to still continue down that path. And Iran being the last one, the only one that was unfulfilled. The other ones were what? Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Somalia, and Libya, and one more that I might be, Sudan. Were the other 6. So this is just mind-boggling. It really is frustrating for dissidents that supported Trump. I guess I can wash my hands of that because I didn't particularly support him. There were reasons why it seemed to be that his foreign policy might be slightly superior to Harris's. But, in the end, I'd like to think at this point that the two probably would have been in total congruence, as is the case in most administrations that transition from one to the other. Obama got elected pretending like he was a non-interventionist that was going to shut down Guantanamo and get the U.S. out of Iraq. Well, he didn't do that. Same thing. Bush campaigned on a humble foreign policy that opposed nation building. He gets in there. That's the first thing that he endeavors to do after 9/11. So that's where we're at. Regardless of how complicit Trump was in on this thing or not, he still ends up looking bad, because if he allows Israel to just do this, and he earnestly wanted discussions with the Iranians, but now he's just covering for Israel and acting like this is great anyways, that's probably worse than actually being complicit with this the whole time, using the negotiations as a ruse. Because you're just allowing your top ally in the world, in the Middle East, to control your foreign policy, even if it totally contradicts your own goals. I think that's actually worse than planning this. It really shows the power Israel has over U.S. foreign policy and has for so long. But I do want to hear from what you guys say. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think that Trump is totally complicit with this attack? Where do you see this going? Do you think that the U.S. can resist being pulled totally in and being part of the strikes? I don't know if that's possible right now, but I want to hear from you on that. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, consider supporting me as a YouTube member by hitting that join button below, or as a Patreon patron. It would support the channel and help me immensely, and I'd really appreciate that. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.